Stroke Memories by Erinville Pinal. The petite, old-looking woman, apparently quite unsettled, bound up in pale silver hair, long and stringy, begging for curls amidst a busy tropical rainforest of short, white, plastic goldfinch feathers, roughly camouflaging an expanse of pale blue and yellow chrysanthemum crumb, hidden amongst repeated waves of long, deep crevices on a faded sea of white space, loosely surrounding, in hills and valleys, the outer surface of her lanky body. Shankily propped up on little bony knees, said, "He can't do anything," in reference to me. Bound to a courtroom that day, the oldish woman was stiffly speaking before a judge, a tall, bony, gray-haired, stubborn man presiding over the case of the woman driving under the influence of alcohol, having permanently injured another driver. Still drunk, even in the courtroom that day, the oldish woman, as the accused subject of criminal concern, was still not allowed to lie, of course, or else she would be eternally court-ordered never to drink another drop of alcohol ever again, as the judge would then be compelled to blame alcohol on the oldish woman's documented act of perjury in the courtroom that day for the rest of her life. The oldish woman certainly could not risk losing everything she had ever gained in life just for the sake of another DUI charge against her. Instead, to prove to the judge that she had indeed remained honest throughout the entire courtroom proceeding that day, in spite of her inebriation, the oldish woman, suddenly taking a judge-ordered break alone in the hallway just outside the courtroom, waiting for the judge to call her back into the courtroom, secretly set out to overdose me on drugs. Only then she plotted would she, at the very moment of my death, finally have proven to the whole world that she had indeed told in the courtroom that day nothing but the truth, that I, then, as a dead man, really could never have any way of ever doing anything at all in life ever again. Then she would finally be off the hook for the eternal debilitation of the driver she had victimized in her state of inebriation that other day, many days prior to her day in court that day, when during her trip back home in the middle of the night from her very own special home away from home, the Tin Lizzie, she had suddenly inadvertently crashed into the car immediately in front of her, obediently stopped at the traffic light just up ahead. The car's driver apparently had been well aware of the fact that the traffic light in the driver's beeline had actually been red for stop, not really green for go, like the oldish woman's unforgettably on that St. Patrick Day's night Irish green beer, which she had greedily guzzled in an endless onslaught of thick, huge, steamy glass beer mugs all night long at her table in the darkest corner, away from all the windows at the Tin Lizzie that night. Finally, at the end of the day in the courtroom that day, the oldish woman got away from the judge with just one warning: to retrieve my poem from her archives and bring the poem to the judge. Apparently, from the judge's comments in the courtroom that day, a certain poem had been reported to the police to have become missing from the oldish woman's publishing company office suite. In answer to the judge's questions to the oldish woman about the missing poem, The oldish woman claimed to the judge to have seen the poem in her office, but at the same time maliciously failed to tell the judge that she had actually been the one who had stolen the poem herself from her very own publishing company. On her way out of the courtroom that day, the oldish woman certainly had no intention whatsoever of bringing that poem to the judge. If she ever did that, she thought, she would thereby have hopelessly ended up proving that I had turned out to have really done something in life after all, gravely forfeiting her chances of ever remaining numb again. Suspicious, she was confident that she knew exactly what the judge was up to. As far as she was concerned, that judge was simply trying to catch her for lying in the courtroom, just to punish her more severely for the DUI without so much as a clue as to the truth behind the poem itself. Boosting her confidence to the utmost level of self-protection, she, as far as she was concerned, was certainly already in the clear. To stay on the hook for the DUI, all she had to do was keep the poem away from the judge. If the judge was simply not going to punish her without accusing her of lying in the courtroom, then it just was that easy to figure out how to work around such a dilemma in life. Anybody could do it, she thought, as she boosted her sense of morale even further. From then on out, she just was not going to know where the poem was as far as anybody else was concerned. Without breaking the news to anybody about what she had really done with the poem, she was simply going to be and stay free as a bird for the rest of her life. It was just going to be that way because she just was not going to stop drinking alcohol. And that was that. Not for the judge, not for the world, not even for the entire universe for that matter. All she had ever wanted to do in life was drink alcohol. When she finally had achieved that momentous occasion in life, she knew that she was going to hold on to her new freedom in life for dear life for the rest of her life, no matter whatever happened to her or anyone else in the world either, for that matter. Still, though, there still was I, a serious problem to her to still have to deal with. She certainly could not allow the judge to find out about any of my behavior patterns. Otherwise, she figured, the judge would then know that I indeed was doing things in life. With that in mind, the oldish woman didn't have very long to get rid of me off the face of the planet before getting fined and imprisoned for both perjury and DUI. Worried, the oldish woman started quickly devising a drug scheme that I just would have to fall for, or else face serious consequences. There just was not going to be an alternative route out of the mess that she had to admit she had gotten herself stunk in, but not for very long, she mused, as long as she could act quickly enough to meet up to her highly dire need for alcoholic eternal bliss, away from all her hassles in life. All along, ever since finding that poem of mine, the oldish woman had started planning on using my poem to finally succeed in life after all. Really succeed. Not just a little bit, but a whole lot. She certainly knew where my money was located. She also certainly knew how much money I possessed. Without anyone else in her office, many times a day for the past 10 years, she had secretly spied on my account. More and more each day she was craving my money. Amazed, she could hardly believe how much money I really had. She could hardly count the number of digits in my account balance. Every time she looked at the numbers, she had to do a double take to figure out how many numbers she was really looking at, squeezed into such a small space in my account book. One time, she could not help risking everything in life as she pressed her left index finger against the top edge of the entire sweep of digits. Slowly, so that she would never be compelled to do it ever again, shaking with feverish excitement, she counted, out loud in her own head. When she got to the final numeral, she had counted all the way up to 11. She couldn't believe her own mind. That man, she thought, was actually a billionaire. There just was no way that she was going to allow that fact in life to be my own truth in life any longer. That much money just had to be hers. There was just so much more, she thought, that she could do with money than that man would ever even merely dream of doing. With that much money, she could even buy 10 beer companies, drinking all their alcohol all by herself, with no one ever even so much as just caring about anything about her in life ever again. At that point in life, she thought, she could just die on all the alcohol in the world and it wouldn't even matter to anyone. She could even just buy the whole world and just drown in all the alcohol and never need any other drop of alcohol ever again. Finally, she thought she would really have it made in life. She would be set for life. Excited, she ran straight from the courthouse to the closest pharmacy. Huffing and puffing at the front door of the drugstore, she wasn't really all that peaceful about her probably publicly presumed excursion, if you will, she thought. Sweating and panting, she burst over the front door, breathing heavily, practically falling on the floor in exhaustion. The pharmacist, an average, slender, black-haired, middle-aged man, probably to the oldish woman, married with children, barely shifted his eyes up at all from his frozen computer monitor screen at such an obtrusive scene that he felt was too obnoxiously welling up right before him all too rudely in his very own store, which he had carefully planned to be and stay safe for, and comfortable to, all his customers. "What do you need?" the pharmacist frowned, loudly calling out to the oldish woman. "Drugs," the oldish woman shouted to the pharmacist, even more loudly. Some strangers in the aisles in front of her coldly glanced her way, frowning at her sternly. Embarrassed, she got quiet right away and clearing her throat quite a bit before quickly scuffling to the store's back counter, behind which the pharmacist was seated at his computer workstation. "Looks like you need a really strong tranquilizer," the pharmacist sternly told the oldish woman in disgust. Blind to the pharmacist's cold outlook, the oldish woman, relieved, gasped with excitement. "Yes, of course, you're so right." She praised the pharmacist up and down for his great insight. Immediately, the pharmacist picked out a colorful small carton hanging on the wall beside him. "This might do the trick," he explained. "Don't take too much, though. These pills are fatal at higher dosages. Be sure to read the label." "But I need a whole bunch," she demanded. "How much do you really need?" the pharmacist frowned. 10 boxes, she replied, still excited. "I can give you that many," complied the pharmacist discreetly, "but I will need you to promise in writing not to take any more than the recommended dosage." "But it's for my, friend, not really me," she hesitantly offered. "Can you just do it? I don't have time for this kind of thing." "Then just get out of here," the pharmacist abruptly and sharply commanded loudly. Startled, the oldish woman quickly grabbed as many of the boxes as she could carry with her at one time, immediately running out of the store with all of them. Terrified, she kept running, not looking back until she found me again. As usual, I was standing in a back aisle of the bookstore looking at books all about successful authoring. The same books I'd been looking at every day since the loss of my poem had been reported to me. On that day, I was heartbroken when I read a letter to me telling me about a certain break-in that had occurred at the publishing company that had agreed to publish my poem. Some of the publishing company's own authors' manuscripts had been stolen, the letter said, apologizing up and down for the misfortune, but not really doing anything to relieve me of my presumably inevitable losses in life. Suddenly, from what I felt behind me, apparently somebody was stabbing me in the back with something solid like smashed corn cobs or something. Terrified, I just stood there, acting like nothing was going on. Stuck in a corner all by myself, I waited for my inevitable doom. Fortunately, nothing unusual to me really happened after all, except for the apparent drop of some light-sounding objects onto the floor right behind me, like drapery falling off a curtain rod. Quickly, I turned around only to see a bunch of little boxes of something that looked to me like aspirin. Bending down to the floor, I quickly grabbed all of the boxes, immediately stuffing them all into my shopping cart, one of which I always kept close to my side at the bookstore just to try to justify myself as a legitimate customer, worthy of all of my daily excursions to the same public spot practically each and every day. On the spur of the moment, I decided to quickly grab, without looking, the closest book I could take off of the shelf closest to me, throwing the book into my cart on top of the boxes. Then I immediately pushed the cart to the front sales counter and bought the book, not even knowing or caring about what the book was. Then, just before leaving the store, I stuffed, quickly and discreetly enough to avoid the cashier's prying eyes as much as I thought I could, all of the drug boxes into my shopping bag, carrying the shopping bag with me out of the store as nonchalantly as I could so as not to cause a scene. When I got back to my prison, I heard voices talking to my mind for the first time in my life. Perplexed, I looked all around the jail for the source of the telepathic noise, only to discover a relatively large roach on the floor in one of the cells, all of which were vacant and had been so for the length of my position as the prison warden. The roach, I thought, must have followed me for the scent of the drugs in my shopping bag. Disgusted with the wretched nature of the wickedly ugly trespasser, I immediately executed the beast with a rapid, forceful stamp of my right foot right onto the top of the bug's body, just for having invaded my own personal living space in the first place. Dismayed, I realized that I had suddenly become a prison warden of a series of roaches I was destined to execute for the rest of my life, just for entering my jail without permission.